Family. First of all, tell me what you notice. We're live. Am I audible? Can I be seen? Can I be heard? Give me a thumbs up or give me apples and milk if you can. And then let me know what you notice. Can you see me? Okay, I'm available. I'm seeing apples, I'm seeing milk. Fantastic. Guys, check out this camera lens. I don't know if you can notice the difference. I don't know how different, how noticeable it is. But the background is blurry, and it's a new lens that I put on this camera. And we talk a lot about the salience landscape, right? Things that you should ignore and things that you should pay attention to. If I hold up this notebook, right, it goes into focus, and I think it says ecology of practices on the front. And you see how I become blurry back here in the background? Legit. And then when I put that down, I go into focus and my background becomes blurry. So it helps in the salience landscaping process. It shows you kind of what to ignore and what to pay attention to. How was everybody's week? It's been a little while. It's been a crazy week. On Sunday, the Sunday that is tomorrow, at Wisdom School at the Hilliard Library here in Spokane, we're talking about what we can and cannot control, and knowing the difference between what we can and cannot control. In Stoic philosophy, wisdom consists in the knowledge of what you can and cannot control, right? The wise know the difference. And so we're going into chapter 7 of Animal Farm. And just to give a quick recap, uh, somebody says they want to know about the lamp behind me. Um, it's not really in focus right now. Hold on, let me see. Should be able to bring it. Hang on one sec. This crazy monstrosity was built by a friend of mine. Um, is this crazy? It's insane, right? It's beautiful. Ooh, it's also extremely heavy. Somebody said cool steampunk lamp. That's exactly what it is. Steampunk style lighting. I do love that thing. You know, a lot of people think it's fake. Like, some people have said like, "Oh, that's a fake lamp in the background. That's just for, I have a green screen." That's a real lamp. It's extremely heavy. So, guys, one of the reasons, I mean, if I look more clear, if my background looks blurry and I'm focused, this is going to do a lot of things to help people focus on the content. And man, it's a beautiful thing because if you're watching this, if you've been joining us, if this isn't your first time with us, then you are part of the reason that we have this new lens. You bought it with your super chats, with your memberships. All of this gets invested right back into the channel. So I deeply appreciate that. And it's just going to help a lot more people focus. So with chapter 7, and of course, guys, there is no monetization on this channel. So if you can support, please do. Please send a super chat. We'll get to those afterwards in the dialogue portion, right? But we're in chapter 7 of Animal Farm. In chapter 6, I just want to give a brief recap. Um, Number 1, more work and less food. That's the first thing that we should remember from chapter 6 when going into number 7. There is a food shortage at this point, and there's also more work to be done. You remember when the pigs said that because their brain is working so hard on how to do the farm, they need like all the apples and all the milk? Well, there doesn't seem to be very much reciprocity when the animals are having to work. Their hard labor isn't rewarded with things like beds or access to the orchard or with milk, right? They have more work put on them and less rations. That's problem number 1. Problem number 2, trade with humans has begun. So Napoleon has started these trade deals with humans, which is a complete violation of the seven laws of animalism, right? Which were supposed to be built off of, Jones's dream and this wider ideal of all the animals living in complete freedom. Number three, the pigs move into the farmhouse. This was a big deal in chapter six because this is another big violation of the rules. The pigs are just starting to look like Jones again. They call the animals by the names that Jones calls them. They live in the house. They read books, and so this is kind of one of the reasons that Benjamin just becomes the spirit of the of Animal Farm at this point. He kind of understands that something is deeply wrong and not a lot is going to change. But number 4, the demolition of the first windmill, right? And why Napoleon would destroy the windmill is yet unknown. If he did is unknown. It might have been that storm that just came through and knocked it over because of his massive incompetencies that we've seen so far. But it also might have been intentional in order to test how much control he actually has over the group, right? So, something to think about. But going into chapter 7, are you guys ready? Are we ready for chapter 7? There you go. I dropped a milk and apples. I'm seeing them everywhere. Guys, let's get into it. It was a bitter winter. The stormy weather was followed by sleet and snow, and then by a hard frost, which did not break till well into February. The animals carried on as best they could with the rebuilding of the windmill, well knowing that the outside world was watching them, and that the envious human beings would rejoice and triumph if the mill were not finished on time. What's what's interesting? There was a quote by Nietzsche. He said, "Each drive wants to be master and does philosophy in that spirit." Sorry, guys, need some water. Nietzsche said, "Each drive wants to be master and it attempts to philosophize in that spirit." And what that means is whatever your drives are, they're going to try to argue for themselves. They're going to try to make themselves super relevant. Have you ever had the desire to get up and do laundry or wake up at 6 in the morning and start a pattern? But then the biological self wants to tell you to like stay in bed. Well, each side is arguing in its own favor, right? And so what's fascinating here is that the animals, regardless of the fact that they're going to begin starving if they don't get access to food, regardless of the fact that they're being worked way, way, way too hard, regardless of the fact that there's hypocrisy at the higher level with these pigs, specifically Napoleon, there's a part of their minds that are dedicated to this narrative: four legs good, two legs bad. And they're allowing those slogans to create a new myth to where they're ignoring the true tyranny that's happening right there on Animal Farm. Does that make sense? Um, but they're worried about the human beings, um, and the human beings triumphing if the mill is not finished on time. Right? Their priorities aren't really straight. Anyway, out of spite, the human beings pretended not to believe that it was Snowball who had destroyed the windmill. They said that it had fallen down because the walls were too thin. Hmm. So, guys, why do you think the human beings would pretend not to believe that Snowball destroyed the windmill? What incentive do the human beings have not to believe that? Think about that. Because it says the human beings are pretending like it was just incompetency. It's like, oh, they're animals. They don't know what they're doing. So that's the reason the windmill fell down. Secretly, they do believe it was Snowball, but they're pretending not to believe that. Right? What's the advantage of that pretending? What do you think? Lucine says echo chamber security. Bell says they can't face the truth, and then their illusions are shattered. might very well be part of it. Why are the human beings pretending not to believe that it was Snowball who destroyed the windmill? Think about this. If Snowball could destroy the windmill, why couldn't the humans? Right? You remember the battle at Cowshed, right? A bunch of humans went in there with sticks, and Jones even had a gun, and they just got wiped out and sent scattering in five different directions. So they're incentivized to not believe or to, downplay the belief that Snowball is capable of something that five human farmers aren't. Remember, there's a certain terror associated with the animals, with what the animals have accomplished, right? The human beings are terrified of this. And so they have this incentive to just continue this illusion that the animals aren't capable of actually taking care of themselves. So the idea that Snowball actually went in and did that frightens them because it means that Snowball is more competent than the humans are, right? However, the animals knew that this was not the case. Still, it had been decided to build the walls 3 feet thick this time instead of 18 inches as before, which meant collecting much larger quantities of stone. For a long time, the quarry was full of snowdrifts, and nothing could be done. Some progress was made in the dry, frosty weather that followed, but it was cruel work, and the animals could not feel so hopeful about it as they had before. They were always cold, and usually hungry as well. Only Boxer and Clover never lost heart. Squealer made excellent speeches on the joy of service and the dignity of labor, but the other animals found more inspiration in Boxer's strength and his never failing cry of, "I will work harder." So, guys, it just said that the animals have more respect for Boxer than for Squealer. How do we think that's going to play out? Remember, Napoleon the pig represents Joseph Stalin, and Squealer is Stalin's propaganda arm. So, how do you think that Napoleon is going to take it? That the people respect Boxer, who represents the hard worker, the one who's down for the cause, but the one who will also do more work and is just enthusiastic about it. What do you think that Napoleon is going to do when he finds that the workers respect Boxer more than they do his propaganda arm, right? I mean, you could pretty much see where this is going. Something else, guys, that I wanted to put to you. This represents the revolution in Russia. This is why Orwell was writing this. Um, and I wanted, while I was researching this, I was trying to get some idea of just how many people were worked to death um, during Stalin's reign. And estimates are from 1.5 million to 2 million people who were worked to death. And a lot of them who were worked to death were sadly under the impression that they just weren't working hard enough and they wished that they could give more. Right. And it's a very sad and scary reality. I mean, a lot of them came to understand that this was abuse and wanted to escape. And there were people who did try to escape. But there's a lot of people who were just really psychologically influenced by this is the way things should be. We're all working for a better cause, and Stalin is the great leader. Um, so what I wanted to do was get some idea. I mean, like, because 1.5 million is just a number. 2 million is a number. We can hardly fathom that, but these are human beings that suffered and died and have, I think, given us a lesson that we can take out of that. Animal Farm is one of those lessons. But to get some idea of how many people that is, think of 20 to 30 football stadiums. 20 to 30 football stadiums full of people would be 1.5 to 2 million people. If you've ever been in a packed football stadium, imagine 30 of those worth of people starved and worked to death, right? I mean, that's really, really intense. And so the lesson is deep. Um, yeah, I mean, another one is like the US active military. I think the active military is 1.5 to 2 million people, if you can, include the, National Guard, things like that. So just to get some scale of the amount of people that we're dealing with here and how consequential this narrative is. So they respect Boxer, even though Squealer is running around saying, "Oh, how honored you should be to be doing this work." They respect Boxer and Clover more. So in January, food fell short. The corn ration was drastically reduced, and it was announced that an extra potato ration would be issued to make up for it. Then it was discovered that the greater part of the potato crop had been frosted. You know what's interesting is that this reminds me of like incompetence. So we always say like Napoleon is a little incompetent, especially compared to Snowball, who came up with this complicated plan for the windmill. Well, here it says in January, the food falls short. The corn ration is drastically reduced. It was announced that an extra potato would be issued to make up for that. And then they come to find they don't have potatoes. They've been frosted over, and they weren't covered quickly enough. The potatoes had become soft and discolored, and only a few were edible, right? So even their backup plan is failing. So there's this lack of competency here. And so I did some research into Stalin. I mean, was he just like kind of grossly incompetent? Not really. I mean, it doesn't seem that he was just a completely lazy or incompetent person. He was incompetent in some ways, but he was a very paranoid workaholic. And when you're a paranoid workaholic getting very little sleep, you're very reactionary. You don't think very much before you act. And then that, consequently, there's some lack in competency there. Um, but for days at a time, the animals had nothing to eat but chaff and mangles. Starvation seemed to stare them in the face. It was vitally necessary to conceal this fact from the outside world. Uh, that that sentence saddens me personally. It was vitally necessary to conceal this fact for the outside world. So their ego is getting in the way of the fact that they're starving. They're like, "Oh, we don't want the outside world to realize that there's no more food because then, they would think that we're not succeeding." Right? Even as you're starving, having this kind of mentality. Um, Emboldened by the collapse of the windmill, the human beings were inventing fresh lies about Animal Farm. Once again, it was being put about that all the animals were dying of famine and disease, and that they were continually fighting amongst themselves and had resorted to cannibalism and infanticide. This kind of reminds me of the phrase, whatever helps you sleep at night. People say, okay, whatever helps you sleep at night. It's not the hill that I'm going to die on. Whatever helps you sleep at night type of thing. This is kind of what the humans around Animal Farm are doing. They're trying to pacify themselves with stories in order to avoid what's really happening. I mean, it's a strategy. Um, so Napoleon was well aware of the bad results that might follow if the real facts of the food situation were known, and he decided to make use of Mr. Whymper to spread a contrary impression. Hitherto, the animals had had little or no contact with Whymper on his weekly visits. Now, however, a few selected animals, mostly sheep, were instructed to remark casually in his hearing that rations had been raised. In addition, Napoleon ordered the almost empty bins in the store shed to be filled nearly to the brim with sand, which was then covered up with what remained of the grain and meal. So, what Stalin did that relates to this. I mean, what we're hearing now is that Napoleon, because he doesn't want to be embarrassed for his poor leadership and his lack of care of the animals in Animal Farm, he doesn't want that exposed. And so when he's negotiating these trade deals, he makes sure to, make them pass by these bins that are full of apples. But they're not really full of apples. They're full of sand, and then apples are put on top so that it looks like you're more prosperous than you are. Guys, this is directly related to the Great Famine of 1932. Joseph Stalin did the same thing. When foreign reporters would go to Russia to just check things out, he would, put supermarkets. He just, artificially inflate supermarkets, make it look like, put all the food in these little markets in these areas where the journalists are going to be, so that it looks like we're prosperous, so that nobody knows that, we have population near starvation being worked to death, right? Um, Really, really scary stuff. On some suitable pretext, Whymper was led through the store shed and allowed to catch a glimpse of the bins. He was deceived and continued to report to the outside world that there was no food shortage on Animal Farm. Nevertheless, towards the end of January, it became obvious that it would be necessary to procure some more grain from somewhere. In these days, Napoleon rarely appeared in public, but spent all his time in the farmhouse, which was guarded at each door by fierce looking dogs. When he did emerge, it was in a ceremonial manner with an escort of 6 dogs, who closely surrounded him and growled if anyone came too near. Frequently, he did not appear on Sunday mornings, but issued his orders through one of the other pigs, Squealer. Why do you think that Napoleon isn't showing his face anymore? He stays in the farmhouse now. Why do you think this might be? And he has an escort of 6 dogs whenever he does show up. The first thing about the escort of 6 dogs, because it used to be four. Like the amount of dogs, which are his personal escort, is going up. And what's interesting is that the threat on Napoleon's life hasn't necessarily escalated. I mean, like, who's trying to kill Napoleon right now? Who's after him? There is a scripture that says, "The wicked flee, though none pursue." Think about it. The wicked flee, though none pursue. It's saying that when you are wicked, you're also paranoid. You think that the rest of the world is scheming because you're scheming. And that's what makes tyrants so dangerous, is because, their own thoughts becomes the universe they imagine. Because the tyrant himself is like waiting, and scheming on people and up late at night planning on how to achieve more power, he comes to believe that everyone has this same outlook on the world, and it makes him deeply paranoid. And so now he has to, wherever he goes, he has to have this escort of 6 growling, snarling dogs. And it's kind of a reciprocal narrowing process, because the more aggressive the dogs get, the more scared people get, and then the more reactionary they become, which makes him then need more dogs. You see how it kind of just narrows and becomes hell. So he doesn't appear on Sunday mornings. So I first want to give you the shallow rendering of that. And by calling it shallow, I don't mean that it's wrong. Some people, when they read that Napoleon is just hanging out in the farmhouse and not coming out anymore, they're going to say it's because he's lazy. I mean, we already know he doesn't do any work. It's said along a bunch of chapters ago. The pigs don't work. They just think about things and, politic. So maybe it's because he's lazy that he stays in the house. But there's another important reason that Napoleon wouldn't come out of the house, right? What do you think that reason is? Why is it a strategic advantage for Napoleon to stay inside the farmhouse? Because, I mean, there are no threats on his life so far. So, I mean, it's not dangerous for him to be outside, especially with his dogs. What's the advantage of him staying in the farmhouse? I think that one of the advantages is, instead of a leader, you kind of become a divine figure. You're raising it up a lot when you have power and you're not even visible, because then you can be anywhere. Then it's just like you just have this haunting spirit that's just overwhelming everybody, right? When you don't make yourself seen, there's a lot more power there. It's almost like a king, right? It's like politicians do their rounds. I mean, you can, but what if you want to be more than a politician? What if you want to be a king or a god? What if you want your mere presence to inspire awe? These are some of the things that Stalin did as well. It's just some things to think about. Trying to become myth. I love that insight. Plausible deniability. These are great. Every untouchable power. Absolutely. So one Sunday morning, Squealer announced that the hens who had just come in to lay again must surrender their eggs. Napoleon had accepted through Whimper a contract for 400 eggs per week. The price of these would pay for enough grain and meal to keep the farm going till summer came and conditions were easier. When the hens heard this, they raised a terrible outcry. They had been warned earlier that this sacrifice might be necessary, but they had not believed that it would really happen. Listen to that line again. They had been warned earlier that this sacrifice might be necessary, but they had not believed that it would really happen. Guys, in Mein Kampf, Hitler said, "The Jews are undoubtedly a race, but not human." And a lot of the Germans of that time, when they read that, they would just giggle. They'd say, "Oh, he just has a lot of national pride. He doesn't mean any harm." Guys, they had been warned earlier. Mussolini said, "Democracy is beautiful only in theory. In practice, it is a fallacy." And people said the same thing about Mussolini in Italy. It's like, "Oh, he's just a nationalist. He's just proud to be Italian. He doesn't really mean it." Right? And then these people went on to massacre millions of people because the people didn't believe it back when they were saying it. Wow. When the hens heard this, they raised a terrible outcry. They'd been warned earlier that this sacrifice might be necessary, but had not believed that it would really happen. They were just getting their clutches ready for the spring sitting, and they protested to take the eggs away now was murder. For the first time since the expulsion of Jones, there was something resembling a rebellion. Led by three young black Minorca pullets, the hens made a determined effort to thwart Napoleon's wishes. Their method was to fly up to the rafters and lay their eggs there, which smashed to pieces on the floor. Napoleon acted swiftly and ruthlessly. He ordered the hens' rations to be stopped and decreed that any animal giving so much as a grain of corn to a hen should be punished by death. The dogs saw to it that these orders were carried out. For 5 days the hens held out, and then they capitulated and went back to their nesting boxes. 9 hens had died in the meantime. Their bodies were buried in the orchard, and it was given out that they had died of coccidiosis. Uh, Coccidiosis is apparently a stomach bug of some kind. So they passed off the way that these hens died. It's just like, oh, they just got sick. Um, but these hens were so distraught at the taking of their eggs to just be sold for tools that they actually revolted. But you know what's unfortunate about this scene? Where was the outcry of the hens when Napoleon was taking the puppies? You know, the puppies that are now the vicious, ferocious dogs that are his personal escort? You know? Guys, the thing is, if you don't speak up, it will eventually be your turn to pay, right? Now there's no one to speak up for the hens when it's their turn to give up the eggs or to be uh, objectified, right? I mean, who spoke up for the pups? You know, Napoleon just took them to a secret place and everybody just kept quiet, right? Just something to think about, guys. This stuff is life applicable. So, 9 hens had died in the meantime. Their bodies were buried in the orchard, and it was given out that they had died of coccidiosis. Whymper heard nothing of this affair, and the eggs were duly delivered, a grocer's van driving up to the farm once a week to take them away. All this while no more had been seen of Snowball. He was rumored to be hiding on one of the neighboring farms, either Foxwood or Pinchfield. Napoleon was by this time on slightly better terms with the other farmers than before. Something that I want to say here is sometimes we hate admitting our situation, and so it's easier to go with whatever the rumor is. Just listen to what was said here. All this while, no more had been seen of Snowball, right? No one had seen him since he got chased out by Napoleon's dogs. That was the first time we were introduced to the dogs that Napoleon now has. They were chasing Snowball off the farm. Nobody has seen him since, right? Yet he is rumored to be hiding in one of the neighboring farms, either Foxwood or Pinchfield. Napoleon was by this time on slightly better terms with the other farmers than before. It happened that there was in the yard a pile of timber which had been stacked there 10 years earlier when a beech spinney was cleared. It was well seasoned, and Whymper had advised Napoleon to sell it. Both Mr. Pilkington and Mr. Frederick were anxious to buy it. Napoleon was hesitating between the two, unable to make up his mind. It was noticed that whenever he seemed on the point of coming to an agreement with Frederick, Snowball was declared to be hiding at Foxwood, while when he inclined toward Pilkington, Snowball was said to be at Pinchfield. I want to re ask this question because, I mean, this is just depicting the severe paranoia of Stalin. And it's interesting that Napoleon is having problems making up his mind. Remember when Snowball was around, Napoleon had no problem making up his mind. He would just say the opposite of whatever Snowball said. Right now that Snowball's gone, it's just like, ah, now I'm kind of just wrestling with myself. But I wanted to pose this question again because I think that we asked this question in chapter 3, and I wanted to revisit it to see if your perspective has changed on this. Can someone evil also be wise? Just type it in the chat real quick. Can someone be both wise and evil? Because when we think of wisdom, we think of characters like Yoda and Gandalf, and I got a yes, I got a no, I got a yes, I got a yes, I got a yes. Yeses have it right now. Yeses definitely have it. Um, and there's a couple of no's in there too. Um, I don't know. It's an ongoing question. I feel that evil requires like cognitively limited states, and cognitively limited states are just bad for problem solving. And so I feel like wise people are less likely to be evil, but I don't know if I can like formally justify that. But I mean, anyway, I will maybe have a conversation about that after the chapter. Suddenly, early in the spring, an alarming thing was discovered. Snowball was secretly frequenting the farm by night. See, guys, and this is the brilliance of Orwell, too. I'm wondering if we can trust the narrator Because remember, like the narrator calls the animals stupid. The narrator sometimes, justifies Napoleon's, you know, terrible behavior. And so he says, suddenly early in the spring, an alarming thing was discovered. Snowball was secretly frequenting the farm by night. I don't know if I believe that. The animals were so disturbed that they could hardly sleep in their stalls. The animals were so disturbed that they could hardly sleep. I wonder what effect sleeplessness will have on their ability to be manipulated, right? And guys, whenever I'm talking about this, I hope that we're in a mode by now where we can apply all of these characters and their situations to our contemporary lives, right? Because a lot of us are sleepless. A lot of us have the unfortunate situation where we so identify as a Democrat, or we so identify as a Republican, that we lose sleep when our political party is in trouble, or we so identify as, whatever thing that is, that you lose sleep whenever those transient things are in trouble, right? And man, when you lose sleep, when you attach yourself to things you can't control, um, you just become an easier target for manipulation. You become a commodity. Um, but anyway, it's just they're just prime candidates for psychological abuse now because they're losing sleep and they're starving. Every night, it was said, he came creeping in under cover of darkness. This is the rumor about Snowball, and performed all kinds of mischief. He stole the corn, he upset the milk pails, he broke the eggs, he trampled the seed bags, he gnawed the bark off of the fruit trees. Whenever anything went wrong, it became usual to attribute it to Snowball. And the I mean, if we want to look at history, Joseph Stalin did this with what he called the Trotskyites. Like Leon Trotsky is who Snowball represents, right? And Joseph Stalin, seriously, during the 40s, anything that went wrong, he would blame the followers of Trotsky who are still hiding in our streets, right? They're hiding. They're not really loyal to the cause, and they're followers of Trotsky. And we have to weed them out. We have to kill them. We have to exterminate them. And they just kind of became this scapegoat. If a window was broken or a drain was blocked up, someone was certain to say that Snowball had come in the night and done it. And when the key of the store shed was lost, the whole farm was convinced that Snowball had thrown it down the well. Curiously enough, they went on believing this even after the mislaid key was found under a sack of meal. Think about that. When the key of the store shed was lost, the whole farm was convinced that Snowball had thrown it down the well. That was just the prevailing rumor. But then, curiously enough, they went on believing this even after the mislaid key was found under a sack of meal. Even though the key is found, they still believe Snowball threw it down a well. Now, why would that be the case? Why would they continue believing that? Guys, our brains are built for motivated expectation. We do not like to interact with the random, right? We want to know that when we wake up, the floor is going to be down there, the ceiling is going to be down there. We want to have a routine. Our brains love routine. As a matter of fact, the amygdala is responsible for motivated expectations of the world, right? So, which reality is easier for the animals to stomach? A, that Snowball is creeping around destroying our lives and we have to band together and weed out Snowball and his followers, or I'm currently living under a tyranny which is lying to me and seeks to eliminate me and absorb power to itself. Which one is the easier pill to swallow, right? The first one. And so the mind just gravitates against all evidence. It just gravitates toward the simple thing, right? The cows declared unanimously that Snowball crept into their stalls and milked them in their sleep. I'm sorry, that's not funny, but milking. If somebody milked me in my sleep, we're not gonna go. Listen, guys, don't milk cows in their sleep. Wake them up, okay? Don't do that. The rats, which had been troublesome that winter, were also said to be in league with Snowball. The cow thing, don't mention it. It's gonna make me laugh. Napoleon decreed that there should be a full investigation into Snowball's activities. With his dogs in attendance, he set out and made a careful tour of inspection of the farm buildings. The other animals, following at a respectful distance, at every few steps, Napoleon stopped and snuffed the ground. At every few steps, Napoleon stopped and snuffed the ground for traces of Snowball's footsteps, which, he said, he could detect by the smell. He snuffed every corner in the barn, in the cow shed, in the farmhouses, in the hen houses, in the vegetable garden, and found no traces of Snowball almost everywhere. He would put his snout to the ground, give several deep sniffs, and exclaim in a deep, terrible voice, "Snowball! He has been here. I can smell him distinctly." Guys, listen. If you have trigger words, I'm not saying anything for or against trigger words. I'm just letting you know that no one should have no one should have the ability to control your cognitive availability. I shouldn't have the capacity to use words to put you in a state of stress, right? Um, and there's a delicate balance because I'm not just saying that you should just be around people who are just saying offensive things and that you should just know your crowd, right? I mean, you should be able to dismiss people from your life. But I think it's not a good thing that we're in a culture where people saying things can now dictate an entire group's cognitive availability. I think that's dangerous. I don't think anyone should have that power over you or over any group. That's just me. Snowball has been here. This is what Napoleon would say. I can smell him distinctly. And at the word snowball, all the dogs let out blood curdling growls and showed their side teeth, right? Cat, please relax. Please relax. Thank you for the super chat. Cat Smith said, it's in a $5 super chat, said, this is so you don't have to milk anyone in their sleep. Oh Lord. That's the running joke. That has to be that. Yeah. I'm not gonna get milked in my sleep. Keep All right. Snowball had he has been here. I can smell him distinctly. This is Napoleon. Let's dial in. And so the word snowball at the dogs let out a blood curdling growl and showed their teeth. So check this out. The animals were thoroughly frightened. It seemed to them as though Snowball were some kind of invisible influence, pervading the air about them and menacing them with all kinds of dangers. The psychological power of fear. Guys, um, now there's like gods and devils in this story somehow. Napoleon is unseen. He's just this force. He's the spirit that invades the farm, and he fills them all with awe and terror. Whenever he shows up, he's surrounded by dogs that will rip them apart. Right. So he's becoming more than a leader. He's becoming godlike. And Snowball is becoming more than just a pig. He was just a pig that lived among them. And now he's like a demon. He's like a demonic spirit that, agitates situations and makes things go wrong, right? They're losing their minds, right? They're sleepless, they're paranoid, and now there's this deep psychological fear associated with a word. The animals were thoroughly frightened, it seemed. to them as though Snowball were some kind of invisible influence pervading the air about them and menacing them with all kinds of dangers. In the evening, Squealer called them together and, with an alarmed expression on his face, told them that he had some serious news to report. "Comrades," cried Squealer, making little nervous skips, "a most terrible thing has been discovered. Snowball has sold himself to Frederick of Pinchfield Farm, who is even now plotting to attack us and take our farm away from us. Snowball is to act as his guide when the attack begins. But there was worse than that. We had thought that Snowball's rebellion was caused simply by his vanity and ambition, but we were wrong, comrades. Do you know what the real reason was? Snowball was in league with Jones from the very start. Snowball was in league with Jones, the same Snowball who Jones shot. Like Snowball took a wound in the Battle of Cowshed. Guys, something that tyrants will always try is getting you to see the opposite of what you know. Like getting you to, and it's there's like these tests. It's like, okay, what do you believe? How malleable are you? Are you just clay and putty in my hands to where whatever I say, you will say yes to? So, I mean, he's basically telling a story which is the opposite of reality. And so, let's see what happens. He was Jones's secret agent the entire time. This is Squealer speaking. It has all been proved by documents which he left behind him and which we have only just discovered. To my mind, this explains a great deal, comrades. Did we not see for ourselves how he attempted, fortunately without success, to get us defeated and destroyed at the Battle of Cowshed? So Squealer is speaking to these animals who saw Snowball's sacrifice at that battle and saw his bravery and his courage. And he's saying, didn't we all see for ourselves how he attempted to get us defeated and destroyed at the Battle of Cowshed? Just like a blatant lie. Um, and maybe it's because they have so much power now that they can just, whether you believe in the lie that comes from Squealer is just a loyalty test at this point. The animals were stupefied. This was a wickedness far outdoing Snowball's destruction of the windmill, but it was some minutes before they could fully take it in. They all remembered, or thought they remembered, how they had seen Snowball charging ahead of them at the Battle of Cowshed, how he had rallied and encouraged them at every turn, and how he had not paused for an instant, even when the pellets from Jones' gun had wounded his back. At first, it was a little difficult to see how this fitted in with his being on Jones's side. Even Boxer, who seldom asked questions, was puzzled. He lay down, tucked his forehoofs behind him, shut his eyes, and with a hard effort managed to formulate his thoughts. "I do not believe that," he said. "Snowball fought bravely at the Battle of the Cowshed. I saw him myself. Did we not give him Animal Hero First Class immediately afterwards? Come on, Boxer. Listen, guys, Boxer is the only hope." Boxer's the only hope for change. I'm convinced that Boxer can take out all the dogs. He can take out all the pigs. He by himself is as strong as the rest of the animals put together. Remember, he's just not very bright. He's very politically naive. But the only hope that these animals have is Boxer. Some people are saying Boxer's in trouble now. Oh God, Emily says Box. You guys have zero chill. Okay. So Boxer says, I do not believe that. Snowball fought bravely at the Battle of Cowshed. I saw him myself. Did we not give him Animal Hero First Class immediately afterwards? Squealer says, that was our mistake, comrade. For we know now, it is all written down in the secret documents that we found. That in reality, he was trying to lure us to our doom. There's a couple of things here. When Squealer says that was our mistake, comrade, he's admitting fallibility. It's like, okay, good, right? The leader at the top is not infallible. He can make mistakes. Um, but another thing, when Boxer says, "Oh no, 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 you're not going to trick us. We saw Snowball. We saw how brave he was at the Battle of Cowshed. We saw that you awarded him all these things." Doesn't that contradict Squealer's statement at the beginning when he said, "We saw for ourselves how he attempted without success to get us defeated"? Right? He said, "Oh, we all saw it ourselves." Then when Boxer says, "No, we actually saw the opposite," and Squealer says, "Oh no, that was our mistake." See how the story changes that quick? "That was our mistake, comrade," Squealer says, "for we know now. It is all written down in the secret documents that we have found, that in reality he was trying to lure us to our doom." Then Boxer says, "But he was wounded. We all saw him running with blood." "That was part of the arrangement," cried Squealer. Jones only Jones's shot only grazed him. I could show you this in his own writing if you were able to read it. The plot was for Snowball, at a critical moment, to give the signal for flight and leave the field to the enemy. And he very nearly succeeded. I will even say, comrades, he would have succeeded if it had not been for our heroic leader, Comrade Napoleon. Do you not remember how just at the moment when Jones and his men had got inside the yard, Snowball suddenly turned and fled, and many animals followed him? And do you not remember, too, that it was just at that moment when panic was spreading, all seemed lost, that Comrade Napoleon sprang forward with a cry of "Death to humanity" and sank his teeth in Jones's leg? Surely you remember that, comrades, exclaimed Squealer, frisking from side to side. So he just told an entire fake story. It's almost like when Will Smith and Men in Black would zap you with the memory eraser, and he would just tell you what you remember, and you're just like you have just like a zombie mode, just kind of absorb what what the propaganda arm is saying. And he's frisking from side to side, which means that he's starting to give some nervous energy. Squealer is nervous now because he's in front of Boxer, and Boxer is saying something ain't right here. And Boxer is the only one with the capacity to turn this whole thing upside down. Now, when Squealer described the scene so graphically, it seemed to the animals that they did remember it. At any rate, they remembered that at the critical moment of the battle, Snowball had turned to flee, but Boxer was still a little uneasy. "I do not believe that Snowball was a traitor at the beginning," he said finally. "What he has done since is different, but I believe that at the Battle of the Cowshed he was a good comrade." "Our leader, Comrade Napoleon," announced Squealer, speaking very slowly and firmly, "has stated categorically, comrade, that Snowball was Jones's agent from the very beginning. Yes, and from long before the rebellion was ever thought of." "Ah, that's different," said Boxer. "If Comrade Napoleon says it, it must be right." It's that easy. The universe reveals itself according to your aims. Boxer has made his aims very clear from very early chapters. Napoleon is right no matter what, and I will work harder. It's important at this point to ask yourself how guilty you are of this. Are you a person that's do you have any of the "if this thing says it, it must be true," or if this person says it, it must be true, if this side says it, it must be true? Orwell is warning us against that, right? You could be the person for the moment, right? It was the only person for this moment, right? And he missed it because he was dedicated to to a narrative. He identified with this narrative, with this slogan of Napoleon is always right. That is the true spirit, comrade, cried Squealer. But it was noticed he cast a very ugly look at Boxer. With his little twinkling eyes, he turned to go, then paused and added impressively, I warn every animal on this farm to keep his eyes very wide open, for we have reason to think that some of Snowball's secret agents are lurking among us at this moment. You saw that ugly look that Squealer gave to Boxer? It's interesting how the tyrant becomes annoyed by your insolence, right? If someone has a tyrannical relationship with you and they walk all over you and they bully you and they just close the walls in, they begin to get a sense of entitlement to where whenever you start to fidget or show signs that you want more freedom, it just annoys them. It's like because they start to take what they've taken from you for granted. You know what I mean? If you're somebody who's a pushover, that becomes a part of the tyrant's identity. So that when you stop being that pushover, they're just like you the audacity to talk back to me, to say something, to tell me your thoughts. Man, it's bizarre. 4 days later, in the late afternoon, Napoleon ordered all the animals to assemble in the yard. When they were all gathered together, Napoleon emerged from the farmhouse wearing both his medals, for he had recently awarded himself Animal Hero First Class and Animal Hero Second Class. With his 9 huge dogs frisking round him and uttering growls that sent shivers down all the animals' spines. Hold up a second. Hold up a second. There's 9 dogs? Okay, just 2 pages ago, he had an escort of 6 dogs. And now his escort is 9 dogs. Guys, Napoleon is very, very paranoid. He is very scared. And the more paranoid a leader gets, uh, guys, his intentions are going to reflect his level of paranoia. So he's got 9 dogs now. Um, they all cowered silently in their places. This is the rest of the animals, seeming to know in advance that some terrible thing was about to happen. Napoleon stood sternly surveying his audience, and then he uttered a high pitched whimper. Immediately, the dogs bounded forward, seized 4 pigs by the ear, and dragged them, squealing with pain and terror, to Napoleon's feet. The pigs' ears were bleeding. The dogs had tasted blood, and for a few moments they appeared to go quite mad. To the amazement of everybody, 3 of them flung themselves upon Boxer. 3 of these dogs attacked Boxer. Boxer saw them coming and put out his great hoof, caught a dog in midair, and pinned him to the ground. The dog shrieked for mercy, and the other 2 fled with their tails between their legs. Boxer looked at Napoleon to know whether he should crush the dog to death or let it go. Bro, Boxer is good. These 3 dogs attack Boxer. Boxer slams one to the ground with its hoof and is looking at Napoleon like, should I crush him? Should I kill him for trying to attack me just now? Or like, what do you want to do? Guys, if Boxer weren't so politically naive, right? It's such a doesn't it hurt? It's like because part of us wants to say, Boxer, crush that dog's head in front of everybody and restore order to this madness, right? But Boxer still lives by the creed that Napoleon is always right. He has no concept that Napoleon has sicked these dogs on him because he was you know, talkative. He talked back to the propaganda arm, Squealer. He challenged him on the snowball narrative. Uh ugh, Boxer's not evil. John, I appreciate you. Yeah, I agree. Uh so Boxer looked at Napoleon to know whether he should crush the dog to death or let it go. Napoleon appeared to change countenance and sharply ordered Boxer to let the dog go. Hang on a second. Hang on a second, John, because now I'm thinking, because of something you just said, buddy. Sorry, John. Shout out to John. I love you. You're just great. You're always there. I wanted to put this to the chat because John said Boxer isn't evil. And there's a couple of ways we can look at this. Boxer is definitely naive, but is there a kind of evil in saying somebody is always right? Is there a kind of evil to living by that creed? I mean, is Boxer kind of part of the reason that all of this madness keeps going? There are certain philosophers that think that it is your moral responsibility to be informed about these kinds of things. John said, let me rephrase. He doesn't choose to be evil. Um, OK says Boxer isn't evil, but he's allowing it over and over. Chanti says, no, he's a true believer. I agree with that too. Mama says, I think it's more ignorance than evil. I agree there. He's not evil, but he's short minded. Very true. Bell says, ignorance can't be an excuse. There's that too. You know, saying I will work harder and Napoleon is always right. When everyone looks up to you, everyone on the farm looks up to Boxer. They look up to Boxer more than they do Squealer. I mean, they're just frightened by Napoleon. When Napoleon walks out, it's just an awe, you know. But he's like a mascot, you know. So does his stance that Napoleon is always right constitute a type of evil, given the consequences? And because I mean, I completely agree with the sentiment that I completely agree with the sentiment that, you know, he's very naive, almost bordering on a childlike naivety, right? And that has to give him some kind of pass. But ignorance is more dangerous than evil. Shanti makes a really interesting point. Adrian says he may not have the courage. That's that's true too. But I think that's a fascinating conversation that I want to continue. Guys, the Discord should be up. I know I told you the Discord would be up this week, but Snowball went in there and destroyed the Discord. No, Snowball didn't destroy the Discord. I got a little backed up with some things. It's you know, but the Discord will be up. Cat Smith said, "Damn it, Snowball." There you go. Cat believes. Now we're all blaming Snowball that the Discord isn't here. This is great. Blame Snowball is going to be a part of the merch. See, we get merch from every single one of these things that we do. Blame Snowball. That's a conversation piece too. Okay, so Boxer looks at Napoleon to know whether he should crush the dog to death or let it go. Napoleon appeared to change countenance and sharply ordered Boxer to let the dog go. Whereat Boxer's light, whereat Boxer lifted his hoof, and the dog slunk away bruised and howling. Presently the tumult died down. The four pigs waited, trembling, with guilt written on every line of their countenances. Napoleon now called upon them to confess their crimes. Here's something else to think about, guys. Napoleon is not the brightest crayon in the box. What if the dogs would have ruthlessly killed Boxer? I mean, would that have given him a stronger grasp on the rest of the animals, or would that have just been so cognitively limiting, that they would have all just went crazy? We could have started this a big like a riot. Like, I mean, there's only certain things you can do, right? Why would you kill the guy who says Napoleon's always right? It's so clumsy. And I love that George Orwell does this with the narrative. He shows us how clumsy the tyrannical mindset is. It's not and that kind of gets back to evil and wisdom and that whole conversation. But um they were the same four pigs. Okay, so presently the tumult died down. The four pigs waited trembling with guilt written on every line of their countenances. Napoleon now called upon them to confess their crimes. Confess your crimes. This isn't a trial. This is a confession, right? I want you to confess what you did. Remember that deity status that we're saying that Napoleon is craving? Confess their crimes. They were the same four pigs as had protested when Napoleon abolished the Sunday meetings. Without any further prompting, they confessed that they had been secretly in touch with Snowball ever since his expulsion, that they had collaborated with him in destroying the windmill, and that they had entered into an agreement with him to hand over Animal Farm to Mr. Frederick. They added that Snowball had privately admitted to them that he had been Jones's secret agent for years. When they had finished their confession, the dogs promptly tore their throats out, and in a terrible voice, Napoleon demanded whether any other animal had anything to confess. Yeah, guys, so this is now giving me like Salem witch trials vibes. Right? It's like it's partly, Russian Revolution. I know, Stalin, did a lot of these things too, guys. Um, Especially in the Gulag Archipelago by Solzhenitsyn. He talked about how there was just this campaign of like children telling on their parents and friends telling on their neighbors, and the air was just thick with mistrust. The three hens who had been the ringleaders of the attempted rebellion over the eggs now came forward and stated that Snowball had appeared to them in a dream and incited them to disobey Napoleon's orders. They too were slaughtered. Guys, whether or not that's true, the hens blame Napoleon. Sorry, the hens blame Snowball for their disobedience to Napoleon's orders. Now, whether it's true that they saw Snowball in their dream doesn't change the fact that they sacrificed integrity to save their lives and died anyway. Um, so, like, if like, I mean, if they're lying, right, and they say, "Oh, Snowball appeared to us in a dream," right? And that's the reason we disobeyed. Like, say that's a lie. That means that you just sacrificed your integrity, right, to save your life. It's understandable, but then you're killed anyway. Um, and if you did have that dream would just kind of showcase that you've demonized Snowball, which is that you've just drank the propaganda down. But they too were slaughtered. Then a goose came forward and confessed to having secreted 6 ears of corn during the last year's harvest. Secreted. He didn't secrete the corn. He secreted 6 ears of corn during the last year's harvest and eaten them in the night. Then a sheep confessed to having urinated in the drinking pool, urged to do this, so he said, by Snowball. And two other sheep confessed to having murdered an old ram, an especially devoted follower of Napoleon, by chasing him round and round a bonfire when he was suffering from a cough. They were all slain on the spot. Guys, let me ask you something. These animals know that once they confess, they're going to die. Because the pigs, when they confessed, they died. And then Napoleon Guys, are you seeing me? Give me apples and give me milk if you see me. I'm back. Am I visible? Give me milk and give me apples. Snowball is trying to end our. We got to stop. We got to stop blaming Snowball. Back again. Look at all the milk and all the apples. Phenomenal. This is a longer live. I do have to check out my internet because I think when I left, somebody said somebody said it wouldn't be it wouldn't be this book club if we didn't have one freeze per live. So I'm downstairs in my office. So I'm gonna have to get a direct connection, and I will establish that. Don't worry. Um, so they were all slain on the spot. So the question that I wanted to propose, now that I'm back, why are these animals still confessing? Why do these animals continue to confess even as they're being slaughtered for confessing? It's this very strange line that's forming in front of Napoleon. He's saying, uh, you know, um, pigs, I want you to confess. They confess and they're slaughtered. Then the hens come up and confess and they're slaughtered. Then a couple of other animals come up and confess and they're slaughtered. Why are they lining up to confess and be slaughtered? What sense does that make? Ruff says it's a way to get out. Chanty says tired of life. Escape. Interesting. Like there are fates worse than death, right? Um, Here is a very creepy idea. Am I back? Guys, we don't have much longer to go. We have two more pages. Listen, I'm going to get a direct connection. Um, you know, the saddest thing is that the last time it froze, somebody said, "It's okay, Biscuit. You're clearly no match for Snowball's antics." Um, Snowball is milking me in the middle of the night, guys. All right, um, we have to get through this. So they were all slain on the spot. I wanted to mention before we move on, there is a North Korea, a woman who escaped North Korea. Her name is Yeonmi Park, and she tells a story in her book of her father was selling metals in North Korea um, in order to support the family, and he wasn't making very much. But they in North Korea, the dictator and the guards discovered that he was selling this for his family, and so they captured him and they sent him to a labor camp. Uh, and when he got out of this labor camp, they had tortured him so much psychologically that his last words were was an apology to the dear leader, an apology to his daughter for not doing more for the dear leader, right? So it's possible to be so psychologically tortured that you are willing to give your last breath for this thing, right? And so maybe one of the reasons they're lining up to be slaughtered by Napoleon is because they see him as something more than just a pig, like he's bordering on deity. Anyway, to continue before I freeze again. And so the tale of confessions and executions went on until there was a pile of corpses lying before Napoleon's feet, and the air was heavy with the smell of blood, which had been unknown there since the expulsion of Jones. When it was all over, the remaining animals, except for the pigs and dogs, crept away in a body. They were shaken and miserable. They did not know which was more shocking, the treachery of the animals who had who had leagued themselves with Snowball, or the cruel retribution they had just witnessed. In the old days, there had often been scenes of bloodshed equally terrible, but it seemed to all of them that it was far worse now that it was happening among themselves. Since Jones had left the farm, until today, no animal had killed another. Not even a rat had been killed. They had made their way on to the little knoll where the half finished windmill stood, and with one accord they all lay down, as though huddling together for warmth. Clover, Muriel, Benjamin, the cows, the sheep, and a whole flock of geese and hens. Everyone, indeed, except the cat, who had suddenly disappeared just before Napoleon ordered the animals to assemble. For some time, nobody spoke. Only Boxer remained on his feet. He fidgeted to and fro, swishing his long black tail against his sides and occasionally uttering a little whinny of surprise. Finally said, "I do not understand it. I would not have believed that such things could happen on our farm. It must be to some fault in ourselves." So Boxer blames the animals for how angry Napoleon is. He's completely drinking the Kool-Aid. The solution, as I see it, is to work harder. This is still Boxer speaking. "From now onwards, I shall get up a full hour earlier in the mornings." And he moved off at his lumbering trot and made for the quarry. Having got there, he collected 2 successive loads of stone and dragged them down to the windmill before retiring for the night. This is a very important sentence here. The animals huddled about Clover, not speaking. The knoll where they were lying gave them a wide prospect across the countryside. The animals huddled about Clover, not speaking. This part is actually a lot bigger than we sometimes think. We think, okay, they're not speaking because of the trauma they just experienced, which is true. But guys, sometimes when there's nothing to say, the intuition gets to speak. And that's a superpower on its own. That can give them some hope. Because a lot of times, whenever we have feelings, we want to label it. You see how Napoleon is establishing labels for everything? Don't the sheep just start bleeding out 4 legs good, 2 legs bad whenever they're confused? You immediately want to label something. You want to scapegoat. You want to point at somebody. You want to blame someone. We're so fearful of silence, right? And this moment of silence allows intuition to speak, right? Um, and that's a beautiful thing. I think everyone, as a practice, should sit for 20 to 30 minutes in absolute silence daily. Because so many of us, especially people who have access to technology like the internet, sometimes our minds never turn off. And so we then confuse ourselves with our thoughts. Like, oh, this must be me. It's like, no, those are just thoughts. Your thoughts come and go. But this moment of silence can be useful if they allow it to. The knoll where they were lying gave them a wide prospect across the countryside. Most of Animal Farm was within their view. The long pasture stretching down to the main road, the hayfield, the spinney, the drinking pool, the plowed fields where the young wheat was thick and green, and the red roofs on the farm buildings with the smoke curling from the chimneys. It was a clear spring evening. The grass and the bursting hedges were gilded by the level rays of the sun. Never had the farm, and with a kind of surprise they remembered that it was their own farm. Every inch of it was their property. Appeared to the animals so desirable a place. Imagine desiring and longing for what's rightfully yours. It's like it's right there for the taking, but there's this impenetrable boundary in the way of you and that thing. Um, as Clover looked down the hillside, her eyes filled with tears. If she could have spoken her thoughts, it would have been to say that this was not what they had aimed at when they had set themselves years ago to work for the overthrow of the human race. I love that little word play there. It says, if she could have spoken her thoughts. That has a two-dimensional meaning. On the one hand, she can't speak her thoughts because she's overwhelmed with the trauma of seeing what she just saw. And so she just has to kind of just have this silence and this turmoil. But there's a second degree to which she can't speak her mind, right? Because she'll be one of the victims if she speaks. So not only is there the awe, which just inspires this silence, like there are no words, but even if there were words, would you feel comfortable speaking them in this kind of situation? These scenes of terror and slaughter were not what they had looked uh, forward to the night when old Major first stirred them to rebellion. If she herself had had any picture of the future, it had been of a society of animals set free from hunger and the whip, all equal, each working according to his own capacity, the strong protecting the weak, as she had protected the lost brood of ducklings with her foreleg on the night of Major's speech. Instead, she did not know why. They had come to a time when no one dared speak his mind. I just want to offer this to you all as people who I consider friends and acquaintances. If you don't have friends on the other side, change that. This is just and I know it's difficult, especially if they're on the other side of the political aisle. If they're on the other side of whatever religion you believe in, if they are on the other side of whatever thing you believe in, right now is a great time to invest in human beings, right? Because the differences between us are not as fundamental as the algorithm would have us believe. um, no one dares to speak their mind. When fierce, growling dogs roamed everywhere, and when you had to watch your comrades torn to pieces after confessing to shocking crimes, there was no thought of rebellion or disobedience in her mind. She knew that, even as things were, they were far better off than they had been in the days of Jones, and that before all else, it was needful to prevent the return of the human beings. Whatever happened, she would remain faithful, work hard, carry out the orders that were given to her, and accept the leadership of Napoleon. But still, it was not for this that she and the other animals had hoped and toiled. It was not for this that they had built the windmill and faced the bullets of Jones's gun. Such were her thoughts, though she lacked the words to express them. When you lack the words to express your thoughts begin disintegrating too. I mean, when people start changing the words you say, you start to think the wrong things too. When we get into 1984, I mean, you think this is creepy. I mean, 1984 is going to take us there. It's really going to take us somewhere. At last, feeling this to be in some way a substitute for the words she was unable to find, she began to sing Beasts of England. The other animals sitting round her took it up, and they sang it 3 times over, very tunefully, but slowly and mournfully, in a way that they'd never sung it before. They had just finished singing it for the third time when Squealer, attended by 2 dogs, approached them with the air of having something important to say. He announced that by a special decree of Comrade Napoleon, Beasts of England had been abolished. From now onwards, it was forbidden to sing it. What is Beast of England about? What is the song actually about? Beast of England, beast of Ireland, beast of every land and clime, hearken to my joyful tidings of the golden future time. Soon or late the day is coming, tyrant man shall be o'erthrown, and the fruitful fields of England shall be tried by beasts alone. Ring shall vanish from our noses, and the harness from our back. Bit and spur shall rust forever, cruel whips no more shall crack. Riches more than mind can picture, wheat and barley, oats and hay, clover, beans, and mangle wurzels shall be ours upon that day. Guys, it goes on and on. Um, so by telling them that this song is forbidden, they are changing in real time the entire agenda. They're saying, look, we can stop pretending now. Now that we're just killing you, now that we're just now that we have the ability to command your confession and then just kill you in front of everyone and no one does anything about it. Now we can just give up the facade. Now we can just take off the mask. Right? We needed the mask at first because we wanted to see how powerful we were. We needed to run these tests. We need to run the experiments on the farm. But now that we know we really have you, both physically and psychologically, we can just take off the mask now. There's no need for songs about hope. There's no need for songs about how it'll eventually be when this paradise, come. It's not coming. We're taking an entirely different train into Napoleon's future at this point. Very, very scary thing to suddenly realize. The animals were taken aback. Why? Cried Muriel. It's no longer needed, comrade, said Squealer stiffly. Beast of England was the song of the rebellion. But the rebellion is now completed. The execution of the traitors this afternoon was the final act. The enemy, both external and internal, has been defeated. In Beast of England, we expressed our longing for a better society in days to come, but that society has now been established. Squealer is saying, this is it. This is the paradise. All we had to do was kill those people that you just saw us, and now here we are. Guys, in North Korea, according to Yaomi Park, in North Korea, there is no such word as friendship. The word is comrade. There's no such word as depression because depression is impossible in the communist utopia. They don't have a word for it because depression can't exist in the utopia that is North Korea. They just take away the word. The word has no meaning. Guys, this has a profound psychological effect on those who are oppressed. Frightened though they were, some of the animals might possibly have protested, but at this moment the sheep set up their usual bleating of 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, which went on for several minutes and put an end to the discussion. So, Beast of England was heard no more. In its place, Minimus, the poet, had composed another song, which began, Animal farm, never through me shall thou come to harm. And this was sung every Sunday morning after the hoisting of the flag. But somehow, neither the words nor the tune ever seemed to the animals to come up to Beasts of England. That was chapter 7. So, at this point, all the animals are Napoleon's personal project and experiment. They have no idea where he's going. But he's saying, yeah, we can get rid of Beast of England. We can get rid of all this stuff. We can, it's just, this is what you get. That was extremely heavy. I think that's probably one of the heavier chapters. But we only have 2 more chapters in Animal Farm. And then after Animal Farm, we get into the meat and potatoes. This is a thicker book. Oh boy. Man. Guys, thank you so much for bearing with me with my internet. I will have it certainly handled. I'm thinking that maybe it's because I have this new camera lens, which is like streams to you like the high definition with the blurred background. And it's like I want to, have a kind of a more intimate setting. But what can you do when Snowball wants to thwart something? Then he'll just This one was a really fun one for several reasons. Um, and Frank, welcome to being an Epiphany member. Lucine, you are one of the goats. Thank you for gifting memberships. Cat Smith once again said, "This is so you don't have to milk anyone in their sleep." Listen, after this, I was going on my milking rounds. I mean, guys, you need to support the channel. I am out from midnight to 2 a.m. milking people in their sleep. Listen, you got to do what you got to do. I have to trade with the other farms. All right, shit is not cheap. All right, so Cat, thank you, thank you for the super. Uh, John said, "Snowball is Gonzo." I do not know what that means. Uh, D said Snowball froze him. Guys, we have to do this. We have to bring people to the book club by making these inside jokes. And people are like, what are you talking about? Like, this is Snowball's fault. Snowball did this. Whenever something happens, like you're like, Snowball. This is the way it has to be. This is just the way of things now. Heather Roberts, thank you for the milk and apples. And guys, we got some merch coming. We're gonna have to do merch eventually. I think maybe we'll start that at like 20,000 subscribers, and right now we should be pretty close to 19. Are there any questions on the chapter? I want to address them, and I want to wait a second um, while we address those. Any questions or anything that we should all consider from the chapter? Also, on Monday, I'm going to be on, I think, Icapod. He and I had a really cool conversation. I'm a theist. He's an atheist, and we just had a great conversation. We had fun. We laughed. We just trade ideas back and forth. I'm like, how does your world work? He's like, how does your world work? And it was really, really. I mean, we abide by the axioms of the cooperative principle, and I hope to just be an example of how two opposing sides can talk, and we can let the ideas oppose each other, and yet we can cooperate with each other on a deep level. It's only the ideas that are opposing each other, right? And so that was great. We're going to be doing that again on Monday. So I will stream that here. Look, we have 18,993 subs. So we need like just over 1,000 more subs to hit the 20K mark. Guys, you know what I might start doing? I was like, I won't go live because 1984 is going to be live, right? We're going to do this live. Ray said book club schedule. I'm terrible at schedules. I'm just terrible at them. But I'll try my best to have the schedule for at least the next chapter of Animal Farm by today. But even though this is going to be the one we go through live, guys, I am such a huge fan of dystopian literature. I think there's an entire Reddit right now that has me tagged in it that's saying like, and somebody started it that said that uh, Rin and I need to have a conversation. I think it's a Reddit. Yeah, it says we need to get Rin to chat with Mr. Biscuit. If anyone has a connection with Rin, we need to get them together for an interview. And it's right there. I think that's Reddit. Or maybe that doesn't zoom in. Yeah, something like that. And somebody did that, which is awesome. And there's like a bunch of likes on it. So, I mean, if that happens, I mean, Rin and I are going to have so much to talk about because I am such a big fan of dystopian literature that I want to go live with this book, 1984 George Orwell. But I also maybe not going live, just kind of recording it and kind of putting it up. I want to do stuff like Conspiracy Against the Human Race and Hellbound Heart. But then, you know, then it's like, then we're just truly a cult. It's like they're just doing all this dystopian literature and coming up with conspiracy theories and sending each other milk and apples. Sin Renfield said Hellbound Heart. Yes. Crucial. Ren, H Mac, Biscuit, Black Pegasus, and Nox collab. Listen, guys, me and Black Pegasus have a collab that's dropping. I don't even know if I should have said that. Just look out. Next couple of weeks, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be absolutely amazing. Emily says, "Do you have a suggestion for an uplifting book to read?" An uplifting book. Um, I do. Hang on. Beautiful uplifting book. Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. We actually should read this book together. Has anyone read Ishmael? One of the coolest books ever. Should I just do it? Should I just show you how cool this book is? This book has a conversation between a man and a gorilla. Like the gorilla is in a cage and just starts talking to this guy about life. And I know that that might sound strange, but it is a phenomenal book. Ugh, this book will change your life. I also have The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis. We're going to get into that too. We have to get into some C.S. Lewis. His mind was just phenomenal. I do think that the Lord of the Rings was kind of better than the Narnias, in my opinion. Um, I mean, what do you guys think? Lord of the Rings or Narnia? They were friends. You know, they would compare notes on these, you know. We need a list. You guys want a reading list? I will put a reading list together and drop it in there. Narnia. Some people say Lord of the Rings. Some people say Narnia. I know the thing I only got one for Narnia. C.S. Lewis is incredible. Absolutely. Yes, on the reading list for sure. Well, guys, I'm going to get out of here because it's hotter in this office than it looks. I'm going to step outside for some fresh air. Hey, I appreciate you joining me. We will have a list today. And if the list isn't up, then you know whose fault it is, right? Like if the list isn't up today, you already should know whose fault that is. I mean, come on. Whose fault is it if the list isn't up? Type it. Thank you. Gigi said it first. Snowball. Dia, snowball. Joey, snowball. Thank you. Snowball. If the list isn't up, if everything goes right, if everything is perfect, it's me. Okay. But if anything happens the way it wasn't exactly supposed to happen, it's snowball. Kat, love you too. Thank you. Guys, have a phenomenal rest of the weekend. We're getting to Animal Farm next week. And then after that, it's 1984.